Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Bonilla, and this is Studio Bridge. And today I have the esteemed honor of interviewing John Rush. Hi, John. How are you?
Good.
So we're here live on Studio Bridge, and so if you haven't done so already, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and share it with a friend. Um, we very much appreciate that. So, John, thanks so much for having me. Uh, pull you into this interview. Kicking and screaming. Now, you were great. You were so gracious enough uh, to offer your time up and to chat with me. So, yeah. So you have. We're going to talk about. I mean, just you have a whole sort of slideshow all prepped and everything like this. I mean, it's like an amazing slideshow that kind of goes to your work. So, um, what I want to do is let's just have you go and chat about, what you have in store, and then we'll just kind of take it from there, you know.
Okay. Yes.
So
Whenever you're ready, we'll progress.
okay.
I thought we'd go through a little artistic development, and then I'll show some pictures of the process of making an illustration. And then at the end, I'll show you a few pictures of what I'm working on now, paintings. So we'll start off here in the past, back at Art Center. These are it's a student assignment, and you can scroll through this. Pencil assignment. They wanted you to learn about different lead weights, and this is all pre-digital world, so everything had to be done with a pencil or a brush, and so we had to learn how to draw a picture. And
So what version of Photoshop was this done in?
yeah, right. That's
Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah.
Uh,
So
and
this is Alice in Wonderland, right?
Yeah, this is based on Tennyson's illustrations, beautiful illustrations for the original book, combined
These
with
are
some kind of science fiction. I used to be an industrial designer, so you can see the influence there. It took me 10 years to try to kill the industrial designer inside of me in my work, and this is the beginning of the process. So the next one is just an idea of the
yeah.
relative detail and this sort of thing. But
So
anyway,
Rick Farrell, who was a classmate of yours, I think, right?
yes. Mhm.
He had told me when I had talked to him years ago, because he's a good friend of Craig Nelson's, that he still remembers this work. And when I first saw this, because I saw this ahead of time, I was like, I can't believe these are the Alice in Wonderlands that Rick was talking about. So it's pretty cool to see this stuff. It's super
Yeah,
awesome. So you studied initially industrial design, right? And then was
at the University of Cincinnati. They had a very good design program there, still do. And I loved machines and cars, and I needed a profession, so I studied industrial design, and then I graduated and worked for a while, and tragically realized that all I wanted to do in life was draw and paint pictures. So I went out to Art Center and studied illustration. So
amazing.
that was the right thing to do. It took me a while to find out.
Yeah. No,
So now, if you want to
awesome.
move on
Yeah.
here, here's the stark contrast between the um, freewheeling student era, and the next thing was a job in an art studio in Chicago. And this is where I really learned to be an illustrator, work for reproduction, work for deadlines, and interact with art directors, which is a subspecialty in itself. And I got there and I thought, well, I'm pretty hot stuff because I can render. And I went to Art Center. And then I got there and they gave me some jobs, and then they showed me the reproduction quality of what I had done, and it was horrible. It was all chopped up and chewy. I thought it was perfectly smooth and wonderful. And I thought, I got to solve this problem real quick or they're going to throw me out of my ear. So I taught myself to airbrush, and we were doing work like this. And so that solved the reproduction problem. But after working there 3 years, that was enough. And if you want to proceed, we're going to go to New York
Yeah.
now, where I
Well,
started.
so but before you start this off, like I think so what certain maybe the people younger generations don't know is that, just like there were gaming studios and film studios, there were illustration studios that were set up to basically service the demands of, clients, like advertising clients and editorial and whatnot. And so instead of going to individual illustrators, they would go to studios. And the idea of a studio was, for at least young illustrators, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, this was almost like a graduate. It was a way to kind of break into the industry, and you would cut your teeth doing this, working at a studio, before you would go and head out on your own.
Yeah, that's right. It was a kind of an all-purpose visual factory. Illustration, photography, graphic design. They would bring work in forklifts. I mean, the amount of work we were doing was just, and I completely burned myself out mentally and physically. I learned to limit the limitations of work there too, which was an important lesson. But yes, so they were great places to learn the business. And unfortunately, they don't exist, but maybe they do in the game world. I'm not sure about that. But anyways, very good experience, and prepared me to go to New York. And I went to New York because this is pre-FedEx era. So if you wanted to be in the big time, you had to physically be in New York, which was the center of publishing and advertising. And so I moved there, and I was confronted with the problems of storytelling, which I hadn't had to deal with in the studio. And this is an airbrush again example of story of a man who fell in love with a beautiful woman who turned out to be a robot, based on Botticelli's Venus. And so we can look at few other of these things here.
Yeah.
More of this airbrush, and another
so
one.
You were at this time, like, fully into the airbrush, like realm. Were you doing anything outside, like going over it with like color pencils or
No, this is, well, a little bit. It's pretty much straight. Well, it looks like I must have primarily airbrush, but I went in and did some detail. I was so afraid to back off of airbrush because of my initial problems with reproduction that I was very skittish about that. But this is for Psychology Today, Dungeons and Dragons. So if we progress here to the next slide, I'll show you the problem I was having. I was freelancing and making a pretty good living, very busy, but I was not happy with my figures. I really thought painting people is the most difficult thing you can do. That's the highest problem of the artist. At least that's what I thought. And I didn't like my figures. This is a book cover I was doing. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll show you what happened. I was in the public library one day looking at a great big book on Michelangelo's work from the Sistine Chapel. And I had an epiphany. I was been working for several years. I don't know why this didn't occur to me earlier. I realized that his figures, well, at first I thought, why are his figures better than my figures? I'm just using paint, and he was just using paint. I'm working for models. He was working for models. It suddenly occurred to me that his figures weren't real. They're cartoons. He pulled the anatomy apart and reassembled it in this very stylized way to express whatever gesture or motion he wanted. He wasn't just copying the figure model reference. So I decided I've got to learn how to design figures. And if we go progress here, here's an example of his figure. And the next one is the way I had to learn from him is I was so busy. I had so many deadlines that I couldn't just sit and copy his work, because even though that's the best way to learn from another artist is to copy their work, I had to put it into my work because I was so busy. And that's what I did. I just started stealing his figures And if you look at the next one, I think we got some other examples here. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the teacher. There's the student for Time Life
Oh,
Books, and
wow.
another one I think coming up. There's the teacher, and there's the student's work. So I did learn a lot about figure design from him, and that was a real watershed for me. So if we move on,
Now,
I think
were you still did you find that your technique had changed? Because, like, I mean, you don't do airbrush, right? Like, I mean, when we met, I mean, because for those of you who don't know, John and I met when I was in grad school, and he was one of my independent study advisors, and so all I knew of your work was oil painting. So it's like really interesting to see that you were like straight up just airbrushing.
yes, long
So,
abandoned airbrush when I got more confident about actually being able to work for reproduction, which is a real art. So here we see God from the ceiling of the Sistine as the Miami Hurricane football team. I hope that hasn't offended a lot of people, but let's move on to another example of. Okay, another guy who really influenced me was N.C. Wyeth, the great illustrator, and he was also very influenced by Michelangelo. So there's a thread there. One thing I learned from him, which I liked very much, was a two-plane construction of paintings, a foreground plane of action and a background plane of environment, which is always much more subdued in its color intensity and value range. So I try to employ that. There's another example. I tried to employ that in what I was doing with my work. And here we see the students' work. This is my poster for national parks, and we'll have some other examples here coming up. U.S. Steel.
and so these were done in oils.
This is all oil now. Yeah, I've long abandoned the airbrush. And once you start working in oil, it's like a drug. You can't really. It's very difficult to break the habit.
Yeah.
So
Now, did you do like cold turkey, or was it like a progression? Because I mean, I remember talking to Greg Manchis about oil painting, and he had a similar thing where he was working in mixed media, like pastel, airbrush, watercolor, throwing whatever he could at an illustration, and then he just like slowly but surely started doing more oil stuff, and then just like went straight to oils. Who was yours? Pretty
yeah,
similar in
similar in that when I first started to oil paint, I didn't know anything about oil paint, so I couldn't. I had to learn how to do it. Believe me, it took a while. So I couldn't just go cold turkey. Finally, I got it up to a level where I could start to show it to art directors and get hired to do oil paintings. But when you learn a new technique, it's a new medium. It takes a while. So
yeah, and also, I mean, I would imagine that like it kind of changes your clientele in a sense too, right? Because I'm sure there were people that were used to your airbrush style, and I mean, the oil paint feels like such a different, like a textural thing.
yeah,
It's got so much
yes.
more body and stuff. So
Yes, about in the early 90s, I could see the wall of the digital world coming toward me as a tidal wave, and I had to make a decision. Do I want to become a digital artist, or do I want to survive as a painter? And I thought, I don't want to sit in front of a screen all day and push buttons. I'm going to go nuts. I want to smell the paint. I want to get dirty. I want my studio to look and feel like an artist studio from 500 years ago. So I thought, how can I
with
survive?
plumbing though,
What?
with plumbing though, right?
Yeah, I thought, how can I survive painting pictures? Because they're going to think, oh, this is pretty old stuff. I have to go retro. I'll have to try to do stuff on canvas and send them the original canvas painting and hope that that impresses them, because they probably won't be seeing much of that anymore. And sure enough, they would, like 20 years ago, even, they would get my work sent to them FedEx, and they would open the package, and the art director would say, "Hey, Ralph, come over and look at this. It's a real oil painting." So that seemed to keep me afloat for some time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't, like working today, like I can't even imagine sending an original in the mail, much less like an oil painting,
Yes.
just like the things that you would have to devise. I mean, because were some of these wet in like, or were all of them dry
Oh,
or
that's yeah, no, as I was approaching a deadline, I had to use those oils with dryer in them. And so, I'm painting over the traditional oil paint with this uh, kind of paint that you could buy that was heavily loaded with dryer, so that the, the top layer would be dry and the bottom layer would still be wet. I'm sure they've deteriorated into mush. But what happened was it became sort of an oddity for my clients to get this stuff. And they tended to start buying the originals, which was very lucrative, well, pretty lucrative anyway. And also, they wanted me to start making the digital files from the original. So I would send the originals and the original painting and the digital file. And so I started to work sometimes with a professional who photographed my oil paintings for the file for reproduction. We would sometimes work an hour, 2 hours on the painting after it was finished. And I continued to paint digitally with the help of my professional photographer. And that was a very interesting experience.
oh wow,
In,
that's
in,
awesome. What year was that?
we started to do that maybe sometime after 2000. And so, so they got to be a combination of a real painting and a digital workover. This being an example, I would say. So anyway, this is based on the robot from Metropolis, Fritz Lang movie from
Oh yeah,
1927.
man. Yeah, that's like that's got some like incredible design.
Well, I
Yeah,
love,
that's cool.
yeah, it's I love Art Deco. So let's see what we've got next here.
Yeah.
Well, back to NC Wyatt. So I'm going to talk about painting an illustration. This is an example of his work for, I believe this was for King Arthur, but I'm not sure. I've forgotten. Anyway,
It looks like it.
in this, I just wanted to mention something in illustration. When you're illustrating something, you can show the event itself, which is what this is. This is the actual climax of the action. Or you can show a picture of just before the central action. If you go to the next frame, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is my cover for Ivanhoe, which is actually a children's book. I'm not showing the joust, I'm showing the preliminary. This is suggesting there's going to be some action. And this is to build tension or anticipation of the event. Or a third thing you can do is show the result of the action, the aftermath. So in this case, it would probably be somebody lying on the ground, a knight lying on the ground or something like that. So you have to make a decision when you illustrate, at what point am I going to actually freeze this and show a picture of this event, or what part of that event am I going to show? So anyway, the cover painting, I wanted people to think, oh, if I open the book, I'll probably see the joust. And that was kind of the idea.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've always
once again,
loved this illustration. I've always loved this illustration. I look at it because I brought a copy of the book, and I always wonder. I always meant to ask you, the dogs in the lower right hand corner. They remind me so much of the Dean Cornwell murals, the Raleigh murals. I think they were called. They're in the 54th, but right next to the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. And I was wondering, was John looking at those dogs?
I probably was. You know, a lot of stuff flashes around your unconscious and you're not even aware of it, but I'm sure
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
probably doing that. Certainly, I was taking the idea of foreground plane of action, background plane of environment, and cutting them very much apart, so we have a very extreme contrast in the two planes. So this is how the start out sketching. This is a 48-page book, so I can't remember how many illustrations I did, but a couple dozen. So we're just like looking at ideas. And once we
These
get,
are awesome.
this was my first and only book, so I was a little careful about thinking about thumbnails and so forth, character development.
Right.
So let's see what's next here. This is a painting I did. Once again, strong contrast between foreground and background plane. Believe it or not, well, this is the Saxon army attacking the Norman castle. And believe it or not, they actually used these scaling ladders to get up on a castle wall, which I can hardly imagine what that experience must have been like.
Is
So I
that
thought,
right?
well, that's so extreme, I better paint a picture of it.
Wow. I
So
did not know that. That is
yeah,
wow.
can you imagine doing that? Anyway, so if we go forward here, we'll see how we did that. Okay, now here's the first sketch thumbnail. This is probably not more than 1.25 inches tall. And if you go back, Ray, and look at the finish, you notice that it doesn't really change an awful lot.
No,
And I
not at all.
learned through bitter experience that your first idea is almost always your best idea. And the more you change it, the more you fuss around with it or embellish it, the worse it gets. So if we go back to the sketch, I wanted to try to keep it as close as I could to that. So we'll see a little bit of a progression here. This is the next sketch. I haven't done any reference photos yet. This is still out of my head. But this is, you don't show the thumbnails to the editor because they couldn't read it. This is what you show them, just to say, what do you think? This
Right.
looks like a good
Well,
idea. So
but to me, like the first, like I could see like the pictures there already in that thumbnail, in the first thumbnail, like in this one right here, like everything's there. But of course, an art director would have a minor stroke if they saw this and thought like, what is the finish going to look like?
yeah,
But
right.
it's so interesting to see how fully formed it is, and just like the formula for the painting was already set up early on. I think that's something that you taught me, that I learned quite a bit from you, was the importance of that. And like, if you don't have that early on, chances are it's probably not going to show up, or it's going to take a lot of work to
Yes.
basically
Yeah.
inject
you're
that
right.
in there.
Yeah, because I think it's all in the unconscious, and the unconscious is a mysterious world, and it's the smartest part, certainly the smartest part of the artist. And if it's not there, you're not going to think your way through a picture. The conscious, rational mind is never going to invent a good painting for reasons I don't understand. But anyway, so if we progress here, this is a dummy. This to show I don't think I've shot any reference yet, even, but I've got my decorative elements in here. This is, from the 1190s. So I wanted to make the type look medieval in those type blocks, remember, from the illustrated manuscripts? And they said, no, nobody will read it. So I lost that battle, but put some ornaments in there anyway. So
yeah, but so you put all the ornaments, it did all the ornament work around it, and everything like that. Wow.
So let's see what happens next here. Yeah, here's my
look at that.
ornament design. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
These are actually based on William Morris stuff from the 19th century. I don't know if you're familiar with his medieval stuff, but it's fake medieval, like mine. This is another fake medieval, but his stuff was so beautiful.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So,
okay, here's my next door neighbor. And it's hard to ask models to fall backwards off a ladder. So that's a problem you have as an illustrator. How are you going to simulate this action? If you're going to paint a picture outside, it's better to shoot outside too. That's another thing I've learned. So let's look at a few more of these, see what we got here. Okay, notice the garbage can lid as the shield. So this is the world of do-it-yourself.
Well, yeah, it's a story. I mean, as long as it's a historically accurate garbage can, I guess it's
yeah,
it works both ways. Now, did you rent these costumes?
yeah, you rent, yeah, and you just rent some costumes and see how they look, see how they drape, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I didn't like the chainmail at all on this, so let's keep going and see what else we did here. Yeah, he actually was sort of falling backwards there, and fortunately didn't hurt himself, but you have to be kind of hard on your models sometimes.
Right.
My next door neighbor again.
That's great.
This cotton stuff seems to work better than the chainmail. It draped better. The fabric, the clothes have to express the gesture. So we see the folds, we see the arm action, the arm comes down, we see the folds expressing that same movement. So we have a movement clear from the belt, clear up to the hands. And that's what we want. We want that movement to be extended through the compression in the fabric. So let's see here. Okay, cardboard sword. And I don't know if we've got any more of these or not. Yeah, a cardboard crossbow. When you're making cardboard stuff, you want to try to be accurate to scale, and this is accurate to scale. The sword was accurate to scale, and faking something like this is fairly simple. You cannot.
So how long did the referencing, putting that together, kind of take you?
Well, we shot for. Actually, I laid out the entire book, and we shot for the whole book in one massive photo shoot that extended over, I don't know, 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
So many photos that I didn't use. You got to just start shooting and hope you get something. And you're going to do a lot of different variations and hope that at least one looks like it's going to work in your actual painting. I knew the layout, as we've seen, so I knew basically what I was looking for. But sometimes you can do a photo shoot, spend an hour with a model, get the stuff back, and you realize you haven't got it.
Right.
And you're going to have to shoot more. And your model went home. You already paid him, so that can be very, very. Well, this is from a Renaissance fair where they had great costumes. Unfortunately, I never used this in the book, but boy, these people looked really official.
Yeah, these are great.
Yeah, local church that looked kind of like a castle.
Wow.
Okay, so we've showed our reference. Now this is it based on the reference. This is the layout that we're going to use in the finish. And so the editor approved that. Here's the color sketch. Once again, foreground, background. And now we go to the little color sketch, probably about 3 by 5 inches. This is the dummy, color dummy for the layout of the page. The editor was happy with everything so far. I was working with some very good people, and they seemed to like what I was doing. So we didn't have much trouble there. So the next one should be that's the finished book. And then we scanned in some foxed paper to make it look old. I wanted them to print it on uncoated stock and tip in the illustrations, print it letterpress, and that would really look like an old book. If they said, oh, forget it, it's way too expensive. So I lost that one, but anyway, it was a fun project.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great. Yeah, one thing that's going to be a theme, I think, with your work, and this is something that just really made me, it caused me to take, I think, one of my largest leaps as a painter, um, was the idea of, how much you put into your color study and how much that can actually translate over into your finish, because it's very much a guide as to, to inform you on how to get across a ton of information with very simple shapes, um, and how
Yeah,
to not get fussy, because this has got some incredible movement and brushstrokes in it. And nothing feels like it's either overworked or underworked. And you can
I
see
think
that
it's,
you've
yeah,
gotten it all in that color study.
I think it's, as we've talked about, Ray, I think it's a matter of temperament. I like to do this because when I'm painting the finish, all I have to do is think about creating the painting and the brush strokes. I don't have to think about, well, design or how am I going to handle this value. Some people, other artists I've talked to said, oh, I'm not going to do all that. So I'm going to drive myself nuts. I mean, I got to sit down and get this thing done. So, but with me, it creates a much calmer experience in painting the finish. So it's been, and also you see, also it saves a lot of trouble with a client. They see very much what they're going to get. And I've had some very unhappy experiences early in my career with sending them work, which they would call me up and we'd have a very unpleasant phone conversation before they sent the work back to me. So I was trying to avoid that.
Right, right.
So this is one more. This is another example of this is
Yeah.
Rebecca, the heroine of the story, almost being burned alive by the evil Knights Templar, but she was saved by Ivanhoe.
Yeah, spoiler alert for people who haven't read this book. I mean, I think you've had plenty of time to read it, so it was pretty old.
It's a wonderful
But
book.
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. And yeah, I remember seeing noticing the thumbnail from the previous pages on that. That's great. It's like the previous painting that we looked at. It's the thumbnail really had the whole layout, the whole design for it. It was awesome. Yeah, this is great.
But we'll look at something else here. We'll look at a mural. This is the National Parks commissioned me to do a mural about the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the first battle of the American Revolution, April 19th, 1775. These are reenactors in between Lexington and Concord in the national park reenacting this. I think they do this every year. And these, look how official this is. I mean, this, you can't get a better reference than this. So I wasn't there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see this, but they sent me a lot of photos, and there's another one coming up here. This is His Majesty's 4th Regiment of Foot from the spring of 1775. And so this is a big deal for me. This is a mural. This is going to be in the park. It's still in the park. Finished it 25 years ago, and it's still there. And over 1 million people a year see it. So I didn't want to mess this one up. Just a little bit about the times. This is pre-smokeless powder. So one rifle firing creates this much smoke. So in a battle, you can imagine what it looked like. And that's why they had very bright colors, because they literally could not see more than a few feet away from them. So I shot some reference. These are uniforms made in England with the original 18th century thread count. Everything very official. Everything really heavy. Everything is heavy. When you do historical work, you realize how everything in the past, tools, clothing, everything was heavy, heavy, heavy. And you realize what a lightweight world we live in now. So that was interesting. So a little more about, I got another reference here. Yeah, look at this bear-skinned hat. Those
Wow.
were the grenadiers. Those were the grenade throwers. Those were the tallest people in the army. So we got a lot of great reference, and they expected a great painting. We don't have time to go through all of this on this one, but this is the layout of, yeah, we'll go back there. We'll just talk about this a second. Once again, foreground, background. usually I'm using a foreground element of action, foreground plane, and a background element of environment, which we kind of have here. We actually have a second plane of action, as you can see. And then the background plane is all those soldiers marching along the stone wall road. The park people wanted, they're going to point to this with laser pointers and tell the story. All right, I want to tell you another thing. Now, this is another thing. When you're working with clients, you've got to understand what ground you have to stand, just like these guys. They said, I give them a sketch, real simple sketch like this. And they said, no, that's not right. They would never be bunched up that close together because they'd be easy targets for the British. They would be spaced out much further apart. And he said, well, if I space them way apart like they really would be, I'm only going to have a couple of guys in the painting and it's going to be boring. Nobody's going to look at it and you'll be disappointed. And so will your park goers. So they finally reluctantly let me paint it this way. So this is historically inaccurate, but it's done this way to create this kind of Hollywood effect. So I just want to point that out as anytime you read history, you see anything about history, it's all abstracted. And how much it's abstracted, I don't know. It depends on the author or the painter. But so anyway, I won that one. And this is an example of just painting the thing with lots and lots and lots of reference. Very long process. And the next one is the finish. And I was trying to make this look like a 18th century painting. I don't know how successful I was about that, but that was the intent. I was looking at a lot of 18th century work, which was quite detailed. This looks very tight, but this was blown up to 40 feet digitally, a digital print, and that's what people look at. So it was much looser. But anyway, you can see that the Americans are probably going to gain the upper hand in this battle because they're the clients. That's why.
Yeah. How long did this take you?
Oh, long time, months, because we had so much preliminary. I had to go to Boston and we trotted around the locations and I don't know, lots and lots of work, and probably should have charged them more money for it than I did, but it was a great project.
Awesome.
Another thing, we're going to look at a couple of things for Wells Fargo. They wanted me to do a logo, redo their logo. And what is their logo? It's a wooden coach and horses. You probably knew that. And they called me up and they said, well, we're looking for a redo of our logo. And I said, oh, I know what your logo is. You have the only bank logo that I can remember. And I'll tell you, once I said that, they were in love with me. So, okay, pretty straightforward, right? But they treat this as a semi-religious object. So we have to think very carefully about how we're going to show this. Are we going to foreshorten it like at the bottom, or are we going to show it straight like at the top? So I'm gushing, thinking about these little details in this thing. So we showed him those, and we'll see what we got next here. Yeah, what I'm doing here. I'm thinking maybe I did this after I don't know if I did this before or after reference. Anyway, we're just finessing the legs. The legs are going to show the action. That's the most important thing in this picture. Actually, the legs in the rain, because they express motion, and that's what this thing is all about. So how do we do that with the legs? Well, we go down in Texas to one of their 25 beautiful fiberglass replica stagecoaches, and we see a team of six matched quarter horses. This is like something out of a fairy tale. So we got the stage going as fast as it could go, and I'm in the back of an SUV hanging out the back of the tailgate with my camera, hoping that I wasn't going to fall out because it was really bouncy. And they let her rip, and they could only sustain this for about these are quarter horses. They could only sustain this for about a quarter mile, and then they'd slow down. You would never see a stagecoach like this. unless maybe it was being attacked by the Indians. They would be going much, much slower, but this is, not the real West. This is the Hollywood West. So anyway, so I didn't know anything about horse anatomy. Of course, I didn't tell them that, but I thought maybe I would study this a little bit before I try the penny. So that was my attempt.
As far as I knew, it was your specialty, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Now I'm concerned about legs and reins. Okay, so the reins, you would never see reins that look like that. I mean, they're not going to look like that. So, but I'm using ship's curves to create this fluid pattern, which I hope will express motion, speed. Once again, the horse's legs, they're really moving here. It's completely unrealistic, but it looks good, I hope. That was the idea anyway. So they proved that. Here's the color sketch. And I think the next is the finish. That's the finish. That's it, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, notice that they have you add the figures in the coach.
Yeah, yes, I suppose that was a good idea. Once in a while, I tell you, it's a matter of the lyrical versus the didactic. It's descriptive of people in that coach because there were people in the coaches. I think aesthetically, it doesn't look as good as it did without people, but you kind of have to err on the side of illustration is diagrammatic, or at least mine are a lot. And so you have to err on the side of the diagrammatic sometimes, and the lyrical is not quite as good. But anyway, they seem to like it, and so that went well. And we'll look at another thing here. This level of detail I'm working out. It's about a 50-inch painting. wasn't real big, but they would blow this thing up on the side of a building. I mean, they got some massive. It was on the side of trucks and so forth. I think there's one more detail here. Yeah, so it's not a real tight painting. I was trying to make this look kind of westerny arty, that sort of thing.
Right.
So we'll look at one more. There it
is.
The artist in action. So not a real painting. So it'd get quite loose if it's on the side of a semi or the side of a building, which I thought would be okay. It's vignetted. I mean, you can almost anything looks good vignetted. So you can get away with almost anything if it's vignetted.
Right. That's probably why so many illustrators used it back in the day, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's great because you had instant, powerful contrast, and that gives you tends to create a nice painting.
Yeah.
So we'll look at one more from them. They did a series on the history of the American stagecoach for them. In this case, I was trying to contrast the old technology of the wooden coach and the drawn by animals versus the steam-powered machine. And what happened before there was a railroad network throughout the country, you would get on a stagecoach and go up to a railhead and get on a train. Let's say you take the coach up from Texas up to Kansas, get on the train at Kansas and go to Chicago. So that's what this is about. So here we see a side-by-side contrast in organic versus mechanical shapes. I didn't like that so much. So here's a foreshortened version of the same thing. We got a lot of more. I'm trying to play up these horses because they're so beautiful. So they seem to like this better. Threw in the locomotive, and that looked better. Okay, I wanted to show this to your audience because this is the dream world of the illustrator. I'm working for a bank, and banks are really good to work for because they got a lot of money. So they flew me down to Texas, and they paid for all these models and costumes, and they got this fantastic replica coach and all these beautiful horses. And I thought, there's no way I can possibly mess this up with this kind of reference, I hope. So anyway, that's basically there. I've already done my sketch, so they're trying to arrange this to look like my sketch. And that's why they're kind of fussing around with the position of everything. Looks pretty good. And we just look at a little more model reference. This was just so much fun to do.
Wow.
About 1860, when their stage line got going from San Francisco to the east. And there's the horse trainer trying to get the horse's head into the same position it was in my sketch.
I mean, but of course, I mean, yeah. It's got to be all in one photo.
Yeah,
That's
she
wow,
did it too.
amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
So that's what it's all
folds
about
and-
there. That's where the gold and everything was stored, and they took it back to the east. But finally, they decided, hey, why don't we start a bank out there, because the gold's out there, it's not in the east, and that's what they did. So yeah, just beautiful stuff from that era. There's the boss. That's my art director from Lippincott. Great guy to work with, and so it was a really nice project. So anyway, we got all the reference shot here. We didn't have a train, so I had to go to books for that, but we got something pretty good. And this is a color painting, so we got to have color, and that is actually the way they painted some of these things in the Victorian era. Final sketch. And they said to me, that train is too prominent, so I had to lower the train. That's the kind of stuff you don't fight them on. So there's a lower train there, but we're ready to go, I think, to the color. Oh, there was a couple of, okay, all this great stuff, great reference. And I get home and I thought, oh, a couple of these figures don't look right. I got to reshoot. So that's me. And there's another one we're going to have to reshoot. Oh, there's the first color sketch. About 3x5, something like that. Now, if you look at the first one, there's more smoke coming out of that train. They said, oh, it's too much smoke, because it looked environmentally bad. Of course, these things belched out smoke like a volcano. You know, it was a walking environmental disaster area, but they didn't want to show that, so we didn't.
Right.
So, okay, so we got the color sketches done. We had to reshoot another figure. So Mexican fellow I know, who looks real official. So finally, there he is, got his head up. I wanted to have this guy this Wrangler in the front with his head up. So I think we're ready to go here finally. This is the drawing we project with an opaque projector. We project the pencil drawing onto the canvas and hope that it looks okay. Then there's another stage I go through, and that is this a stage where I take a acrylic paint and a sharp brush and go over the lines. And this is the final check. It's amazing what you find in the final check. Make sure the hands are in perspective, the ellipses are correct. Everything looks okay and is proportional. That's really what you're looking for here. So we've got that done. And then we're ready to go. We're done here. Okay, finally. This is taking forever to do this. Run a wash. You never want to start on a painting on white canvas that you're at the extreme end of the value range. You want to drop down somewhere in the mid-value range, and then you start to build up your lights first. That's what I do. I want to get to the lightest lights first. So I have mid-value. Second thing is lightest value. Third thing is darkest value. And you'll see that how we progress through that. Yeah, so we're building up our lights. This stuff that's still in blue will be mid-value. Okay, here we go. So we're bringing our darks now. And we've already got the darkest darks that we're going to see in those horse shadows in the foreground. So I've got my lightest lights and my darkest darks already. So I'm going to key off of those two extreme values and then fill in the middle value range work. So this is kind of like the anchors, the value anchors in a painting. And it makes it much simpler to, particularly in a detailed painting like this. You have to make so many value decisions and so many shapes. So as we progress through here, we're just gonna, okay, now, next thing I've done, the foreground horses not only are the darkest darks and the lightest lights, but they're the most detailed element in the painting. So we're going to slowly back off that amount of detail as we go back in space. So once again, I can key off that. Those front horses are telling me value, dark and light, and they're also telling me level of detail. So that's what we try to put in as much as quickly as possible. And we're just, the rest of it is just a matter of filling it in.
So you're using it basically as an anchor
Yeah,
for your screen to for the rest of your piece.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did extensive work, preliminary. I knew what the design was going to be. Then in the painting, I'm setting up the basic edges of value and detail. And then I just fill in the rest slowly. Makes my life much, much, much easier.
And how long did this whole thing end up taking you?
Oh,
This the painting
looked like a
process,
long
painting
time.
part of it.
I can't remember, but it looks like it took a long time. It probably did. I'm sure it did. I can't remember actually. So anyway, once again, I'm trying to make this look like a painting from the period, from the 19th century. And I don't know how successful I was, but there's once again, a slightly diagrammatic aspect to these history paintings. If I was just doing a purely lyrical painting, I wouldn't put so much detail in that engine. I would make that much, I would push that back. But it's, you're trying to, these are people, they're going to use this as a calendar and put it in their museums. People are going to look at this and hopefully understand a little bit about what locomotives look like then. So I'm a little bit more on the didactic side than I might be if I was just doing a lyrical version of this. So that's the end of that. And I just wanted to show you a few examples of what I'm working on now. I'm painting, not illustrating. And I've been working on a series from Homer's Odyssey. So we have some drawings. This is one of his rowers. This is Agamemnon. Odysseus was the hero of the story. He was a Greek general and engineered the defeat of the Trojan army. Took him 10 years. And so these are some of the characters in the story. And the Odyssey is a story about his returning to Greece. It took him 10 years and had many adventures, mainly with women. So there's Helen, who started the whole trouble by running off. She's a Greek. She ran off with the Trojan playboy Paris. And her husband didn't like that, and that started the whole war. So there's the Cyclops, Polyphemus. I tried to paint him from the front with one eye. Everything I did looked so stupid. I decided to do it from the back. So that's one way to get out of the problem. Penelope, this is Odysseus's wife. She's pining for him. He's been gone for 10 years. So I'm trying to get much more abstract here in my work than I did previously. We can forget the didactic. We're trying to be lyrical here.
Are these charcoal or
yeah, these are
graphite?
Mainly charcoal. These are the sirens that sang a song that hypnotized the crew of Odysseus and would lure ships to the rocks below, and they would crash and the sailors would die. The painting based on the sketch. This is Telemachus, his son, sitting on the seashore waiting for him, waiting for Odysseus to come home. There's a painting based on that. So all I'm doing is experimenting with different areas of Odysseus, and he's being helped by Athena, who is his kind of guardian during the story. She's always making him taller, younger, stronger, and more handsome. So I'm just experimenting with various kinds of levels of abstraction, basically. He's trapped by, there he is, he's trapped by Calypso. She said, "Stay on my island. I will be young and beautiful forever, and you will be handsome forever, and the island will be idyllic. And he says, no, I'm going back to my family, grow old and die. So I thought that was a great story. Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Circe, another sorceress, she turns, this is his crew members into pigs. And there's a long story there, which I won't go into, but she's up to no good. And that's the old, there's the the first one is the romantic version. The second one is the modern version, complete with cubist pig. So you can see I'm just fooling around with various ways to do things. There's another shot of Penelope waiting for Odysseus. It's the more lyrical version of it. And this is something I just did recently. This is not from the Odyssey. It's just a couple of spirits. And I'm experimenting with value, compressing the values, abstracting the color, pushing the people to the edges of the painting. I want to do more of that. So I'm not painting for a market. And I'm actually now looking for a new gallery to sell this, and I may never find one actually, but that's at this point in my life, painting is a vast universe and can never be explored in a lifetime. So I am trying to, I've dedicated my whole life to it, and I've just kind of scratched around the edges, and I'm trying to do a little more exploration of painting while I'm still capable. So that's my that's the gist of my activity now. And that's it.
Oh, wow. So I wanted to kind of get through all of the images because there's so many that I wanted to make sure everyone saw all these beautiful things before I started really asking you a bunch of questions on it. So like with if I look at your work just from the slides you showed me, like I could see a progression of things where you're and in terms of just stylistically, like who you're looking at and what are your influences. But at least that's what I thought at the beginning. But a lot of this stuff I realized just from hearing you talk is that you kind of make the style or the approach of how you're aesthetically going to handle something based off of where the subject matter is, or where the client, or what the illustration is, at least for your illustrations. Is that something that you've kind of always done in a sense, or because I know you have like you have a really wide breadth of influences, and you look at a lot of people. But I know like you really love painterly work and the idea of abstraction and working with brushstrokes and getting shapes out of there. But you can dial up the tightness and dial it down, and I think that's like I want to know if that was something that you just kind of always like to do, or you felt that it just made a better image.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of personality. I was always fascinated by, I of course loved to draw as a child, but as I got a little older, I thought I want to get so I can paint and draw stuff that's really hard to draw. And I got really interested in technical mastery of doing things. And my achievements have been, looking back at all this, my achievements have been relatively modest, but was great fun, for example, as you said, to adjust the style of a painting based on what story you're trying to tell. I love history, so I obviously do a lot of history. Is this a medieval story, or is this a story from the Romantic era? And if it's a medieval story, it should have, I think, the feeling of the medieval period a little bit. even though I didn't really do that in Ivanhoe because it was a kid's book. If I had done it, an adult version of that, it would have looked quite different. It would have been much flatter and more medieval-like, but it wasn't going to work as a kid's book. So here we have 19th century painting. I mean, it's supposed to look like 19th century. So it's fun to try that. Another thing, we have here's the West, right? So we have, all of us have an image of the West in our mind that's mainly come to us through television and movies. That's not the real West. That's the television West. And so if you're an illustrator, you kind of have to, your vision of the West was created by the same process. And if you are going to convey things to people, you sort of have to work in that realm, that language that they have seen, or they're not going to be able to, they're not going to pick up on it. That's
Right.
another thing I've learned.
Yeah, because there's definitely a difference between like, how Ernest Bloomshine would portray the West versus like how Tom Lovell did.
Yeah.
And in how, like the likes of Howard Terpening, where it was so much more dramatic and narrative. And I think it's really, I mean, you and I have talked about that in the past, of just the idea of how illustrators, there became a point where the illustrators like Tom Lovell went, as their work, the demand for their work kind of dropped in a sense, and as the market kind of shifted away from more narrative and illustrations to more, like more expressive, because you had like, I mean, Lovell, what he went from to the 40s, 50s ish, and then basically things started to get flatter and flatter and flatter, and that's where you had like Kobe Whitmore and in that realm, and that went into Peak and Bernie Fuchs, and so like you could see like illustrators like that had that type of training went to a place where that type of work, what they were specialized in was valued again, and that was Western painting. And I think it's interesting how much that then influenced the TV, then influenced our vision of the West, and just set that precedence, that template up. Whereas like if you actually see Western painting, it's like people like Maynard Dixon, like it's very foreign, in a sense. And I think nowadays there's a synthesis happening where the people are looking at Maynard Dixon, and then they're also looking at like, all of these other Western artists that were former illustrators, and then kind of doing narrative pieces with that design sensibility. And I think it's that you as an artist is kind of speaking to that in a sense. You're really conscious of that, which is I don't think is very common. Like I know a lot of illustrators who are, they are what they are. Their wiring is, a set aesthetic, and they can make an entire career of just sort of sitting in that realm. But like if I look at that and I look at this, it's like that's like two different artists right there. And like you showed basically like, and they're not like decades apart. I mean, this is only, I mean, you were working a lot on this stuff in parallel a lot of times too, right? Because I remember when you got the Wells Fargo job, because that's when we were working, I was working with you in school. And then when we had chatted, we would chat, for those you don't know, after I graduated, I would call John with all of my troubles and have him still look at my work. And so John would give me all this feedback, and we would talk about painting and have these incredible conversations. And but you were working on this stuff, as you were working on illustration stuff. So it's almost like you're flipping a switch, and you're is it important to you that I guess it isn't, but I know it's kind of a rhetorical question in a sense, but is it important to you that people know like, oh, that's definitely a John Rush brushstroke right there, or that's almost like where people, like you could tell what a like what a sergeant looks like, um, just based off of how he kind of handled something. Like he had he had a uh, an evolution to it, his approach of painting, but it kind of still remained what he was doing in the end of his career, outside of the watercolors, um, was, you know, pretty consistent. I mean, it would get better, obviously, and get more refined, and he would try different things, but like aesthetically, I mean, he like you knew a sergeant when you saw one. Um, does that make any sense? My question?
Yes, generally, yes, it's generally not good for your career to bounce around in your style, because you generally want to get known for something. And if you do style number 47, when people need style number 47, they think, oh, let's call him. He does style number 47. But if you're bouncing around in your style, it's going to confuse them. But I'll tell you, Ray, I don't know if you've experienced this in artists, but I'm not really in control of this stuff. I mean, it just sort of happens, and I try to rationalize it, but it comes out of the unconscious, and the unconscious in my unconscious has a very short interest span, and it is constantly looking for some new variation. And so I've never been able to be consistent over a long period of time for reasons that I don't really understand.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, you're, uh, but even at your, at this point in your career, like you're still something I'm hoping that I will do, uh, when I reach, your part of your career is have the same exact like intense drive to kind of search for, powerful images in the best and doing it in the best way possible. Because like, you see this type of stuff, like there's so much uh that you're looking at. Like like you said Michelangelo, but like I know we had really great conversations about, you know, everyone from, Wyeth to Robert Weaver, and and design sense and uh the power of line and like fetching, and because I see so much of this influence, and then I see like even people like Bob Heindel and like, or just these decorative elements. I'm reminded of like this one, which like these ones right here. I mean, just like how pattern, heavy it is, and compression of values, and how graphic it could be, and um I find that like I really admire that about you, and it always makes me want to think to myself like, am I doing this the best way possible? Is there a better way to, or better solution to this type of painting? I mean, I would imagine that you're never really comfortable uh in what you're doing, you know.
No, no, I'm not. I've never been comfortable, and I'm still not. I'd probably go to my grave being uncomfortable, which is, who knows why. I mean, once again, it comes out of the unconscious. My unconscious is never satisfied. It's never happy. It's always looking, and it's been that way quite consistently throughout my life. And every artist is different. I admire people who love their work, are admired by the general population, are very successful, and lead a great life of a consistent and well-recognized style. I wish I could do it, but
Yeah,
I've been able to figure out how.
it's but yeah, I've had great conversations with John English uh about this, and then also like about his father, and like how, Mark English was very much like that too, in the sense that like it's like you look at his work, and it's it's like you start from Mark English, like what type of Mark English you want. It's like he's like a moving target. What he was doing, he's always kind of changing things. And I remember at the near the end, at the end of his life, he was still pushing and doing completely different things that he was doing 10 years before. So I guess it's just a certain type of wiring uh that certain artists have. I mean, I'm definitely in that camp in the sense that like I'm really never happy with doing. I fantasize about just like, oh, if I could just do it this one way, I know I'll be happy. If I could just find this one way of doing something, I will I could get these paintings done in a manner that is as least stressful on me, but
Yeah.
I find that anytime I do that, it turns into more of an exercise, and then rather than the painting itself. And you almost treat painting like the same way kind of Harvey Dunn would think about it, in the sense that they're like unique uh, elements that exist in nature, and these things need to be treated. You kind of have to like let it be what it's going to be, like these ideas. And the more you interject yourself in them, the worse the painting, the image becomes, because you're, watering it down uh, with your baggage, and
Your baggage, all your past style stuff that's been set up in your brain like concrete. And actually, right now I'm in the process of unlearning many things that I've learned in the past. And unlearning is difficult. It is really jackhammering stuff out that's set in concrete. So um, it's unlearning is, I think, as hard as almost as hard as learning. So that's an interesting process, though. Um, I'm so happy that I'm working in the art world, because there's no boundaries to this stuff. It's limitless. I could live 300 years and never really accomplish probably what I would like to. And so every day when I'm working, it's something, even though I've been doing it for decades, it's something new. It's always a new problem, and I have to figure out a new way to do it. So that's been great fun. And I feel extremely fortunate to been able to avoid having a real job and sitting around painting pictures all my life.
so it's so what is I guess next for you in terms of this painting series? Are you gonna stay in the Odyssey? I mean, it is filled with just, I mean, you could spend 4 lifetimes trying to illustrate, just actually be inspired by it. But
Yes. No, I'm probably pretty close to being done with that. I started that as a theme because I'm an illustrator, right? So I got to paint story paintings, right? I don't know what else to do. So I've done that for quite some time, and I'll probably, the last one I showed you, those two winged spirits, that's not from the Odyssey. That's just fooling around. I'll probably do more stuff like this that is not specifically from a certain story, I think. And I am, as I say, looking for a new gallery, and I'm hoping I'm going to find someone who's interested in selling this for me. So, yeah, right now I don't know where this is headed, but it's certainly in an abstract direction, and it's very interesting. I think, when you're relieved from specific assignments, where you're really thinking about conveying an idea to a general audience, and you can concentrate on not worrying about general appeal in a painting, you realize how much the unconscious is in charge of everything. And you don't really know where you're going. You don't really know, because it's unconscious. It's not conscious. It's going to take you someplace, and you're sitting there. You go to the art store and get the art materials and put it in your hand, but the unconscious part of the brain is in control. It really feels that way to me more and more. And that makes it very mysterious and unpredictable in regard to what I might do in the future. But it's the only way to go.
well, I mean, I think that's, I don't know. I mean, as just where I'm at personally as an artist, it's like you describing that is giving me so much anxiety, but I know deep inside my 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 gut that that's like what I need to do in order to like eventually get there, in order to be a better uh painter. And it's such a it's such a weird, you and I talked about this all the time, like kind of how the progression of an artist and how they evolve. And there were things you were telling me, like, 10 years from now, you would say things like 10 years from now, you're gonna be able to do this in your sleep, and you're gonna realize that uh this is not, you're gonna be able to paint something, anything you really want in your sleep, and then realize, like, okay, now what do I do now? And now I have to kind of do it completely differently, and it's going to keep me up at night. And like, you were able to predict, I think, my life in blocks of 10 years, and I would think like, no way, John, and then it would happen all the time. And so hearing you uh speak like that now I view it as like me. I'm really conscious of it, because it's like, well, that's probably going to be, if I can make it, and I'm still painting uh in 30 years, then I'm going to have to deal with these things. And I think that's so cool to hear, because it's almost like it really feels like it's like you're just constantly learning. And that's super exciting. Like, it feels to me, I mean, at least in your paintings, uh you're really excited about what the next piece is going to be. And I don't think that's something to be uh to note, because there might be artists. I mean, I've read a lot about it, artists that I admire that have, I mean, NC Wise is a classic example of that, where he was really frustrated at the end of his life,
Yeah,
because he never really felt that he was a real painter.
yeah,
And boy, that scares me. And so I'm I mean, obviously he was dealing with different sort of um a different culture at the time, and different sentiment towards specific things. But um I think you're the opposite of that. You're like really, really excited, and just pushing yourself in different directions, and seeing where that kind of takes you. And you're not afraid to just completely undo everything that you did before. And whether or not it looks like, a piece that you did from 5 years ago, really isn't important. It's What's important is, like, is the painting good or not? And uh that's pretty cool. It's a long way of saying, like,
yes, and I'm sure you'll
uh,
be painting in 30 years, and you will do the Ray version of this, and we don't know what that will be, but it'll be your version, and you will, I'm sure at that time, you will realize that art is so uh, giving to you as the artist, because it presents you with these limitless possibilities that it just inundates you with ways to do things, and makes your life endlessly interesting. So I think it's it's a good period. I mean, I'm enjoying this, although I have no roadmap. I'm out in the woods without a compass. I'm showing you this. I'm showing you the stuff that I've completed. I'm not showing you the many paintings that I have thrown in the trash or painted over. Some of these paintings that I've shown you, I think there were probably two other paintings underneath. So lots of room for a possible failure when you're out here stomping around in the forest. But it's interesting, and so far quite enjoyable.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that is by the way, I can attest to, John, is that that whole, you did, these are the paintings that you wanted to show that were done. Because I remember visiting your studio, and you had stacks of paintings, and I was saying, like, what are you going to do with these? And you're like, no, that's these aren't it. It's I was like, wow, I wonder if John, if I could, I was trying to see if I could wait for you to go to the restroom, so I could, stick a couple in my backpack. But I never you never gave me that chance. Um but yeah, so I think this is a great, uh, a great point to end the conversation. Thanks so much, John. This has been great. I this is like one of the first interview where I just sat back and just really listened to, and watched you go through this work, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope those that are watching uh, are probably happy at the fact that I'm not talking too much. I didn't talk too much this episode, but this work is beautiful, and thanks so much for putting this together. This is I think this is absolutely amazing, and I know that this is going to be extremely inspiring for anyone that watches this. So um yeah, did you want to say anything else, any last things, or
Well, thank
um
you for inviting me. Every artist likes to talk about himself and herself, and I hope your audience found it interesting. So I appreciate the opportunity.
awesome, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Again, please like and subscribe and share it with a friend. We'd very much appreciate that, and thank you to Timmy Trayvon and John English for allowing me to uh, co-op Studio Bridge for another episode. So I'll always enjoy